If you've seen the last two videos, not streams, videos, it's actually two separate videos of the same stream. When I was on Jacob Faturecci's stream, why do I see fit to show again how well, you could say I failed to make my point. I was, in a way, defamed. But I still think it's useful for you to see how they debate and how they rig the debate by not letting me speak, interrupting me, putting me backstage, because they don't like what I'm saying. And when I was put backstage, unable to make my voice heard, except maybe in the live chat, they were saying things about me. And I listened to it more than once to read between the lines. I mean, obviously they don't like me, but I was never even given the chance to make my point. And when you accuse people of something, you kind of need to, no, you don't kind of, you really need to back it up with details. So if you're going to accuse somebody of being stupid or a murderer or a thief, you have to specify. If you accuse somebody of murder, whom they're supposed to have murdered; if they are a thief, whom they were supposed to have the property that they were supposed to have stolen. If you're accusing somebody of sexual misconduct, you would have to say what it was and with whom, and all these things that would be obvious to anyone legally trained. But I guess once upon a time there were all these unfortunate souls being accused of vague claims that are never specified or substantiated. And I suppose if enough people made that claim, it would be believed without question, particularly if the person saying it was an important person. So if you go to my last two videos, not streams, you will see what they were doing. And you would have thought, okay, this is what I would do. If I thought somebody was stupid, I would say they're stupid because they think this, they said that, they, do whatever. And that's how I would go about it. I mean, this is how, you need to make out your claim. And also to answer the obvious questions. If you accuse somebody of being a murderer, you have to say who they murdered. Otherwise, it's just not enough. And I think on the whole, I made out my claims. I said Hezi was long-winded and platitudinous. And perhaps he's, a well-meaning sort of chap. I think on the whole he is. He's trying to calm things down and be all things to all men, and say certain harsh verses of the Torah doesn't really mean what it says, and everybody will be fine in the end. And it's, you can't sweep all these things under the carpet forever. the fact is, Jews and Muslims don't agree with Christians. They don't worship Jesus, and they both say that worshipping a man is idolatry. And it really is as simple as that. You either care or you don't. And I get it that, if your income is derived by being a pastor or a priest, or if your Christian identity is important to you, then you're not going to care if Christianity is idolatry, and you will, keep pretending not to understand what I'm saying, and you just wouldn't care. And this is all you need to concentrate on. Forget all the narratives and the biblical characters. They are irrelevant. Of course, they're going to be different and competing narratives or certain stories, such as the story of Abraham and Isaac. And, apparently Muslims think it's Abraham and Ishmael. It doesn't matter. Many people actually take a position on things they couldn't possibly know about, such as whether the universe was created by God, obviously, if it was indeed created. And why do they take these positions that anyone would immediately ask, well, you weren't there when the universe was created. How would you know? Why would you, stick your neck out and take such a strong position on it, about it being created or being uncreated, because it was always eternal and didn't need to be created? And it's because you take one or other position in order to make it logical to obey God's laws or not. So if you want to obey God's laws, then you would know that it's helpful if you believe that God exists. And then you would be more likely to obey his laws if you literally believe that he exists and he created the universe and sent divine revelation to us in the Torah and the Quran. You would actually have to accept an entire package of beliefs, in order to believe in God. That's how it is. So if you're Jewish, you would have to take the position that Christians are idolaters because they worship a man. And if you're Christian, you would take the position that Jews have rejected the new covenant, and the new covenant is Jesus. And if you're Muslim, you will be saying that the Quran is the later, better, and final revelation by God to humanity. And do people literally believe in the stories? I don't think so. But, if you decide to be one of the three, you would have to subscribe to different narratives. And I get it that, Christians are not wanting to explore the meaning of the word idolatry, because it might apply to them and it is a mortal sin, and even they have admitted that it is a mortal sin. So they're not comfortable with discussing the subject, and they don't want to be told they're idolaters because it's a mortal sin, and Jews and Muslims will say they're going to hell. do they even care? Because I suspect for a lot of them, they really want to hold on to the religion of their ancestors. They do not want to become Jews. They do not want to become Muslims. They want to be 21st century Christians, um, adopting or reaffirming the religion of their ancestors. But what if it is indeed idolatry to worship a man? Then all kinds of questions are raised, such as where are their ancestors? Where did they go on death? Did they all go to hell? If it is true that Christianity is idolatry, and what does it mean for their afterlife? And they may even decide that they would rather die and go to hell more than once, just to not be seen to be adopting Islam. And I understand. I imagine they think, well, if it's all lies anyway, I'd rather be in the religious group of my ancestors and the people who look like me, who share the same culture, than hang out with these fresh off the boat immigrants and their foreign, Asian, brown, or low status immigrant culture. That is, of course, what they cannot bear. And the position of Unitarian Christians is also very interesting because Unitarian Christianity is considered to be heresy by Trinitarian Christians. But there are people such as Sam Titterman who wish to remain within the fold of Christianity rather than accept or submit to the logic and morality of Islam. Because, well, it's not just a matter for him, that there's his children and there's his wife, and they would probably be, disgusted and horrified that dad should become Muslim. So that's why a lot of American men adopt the in-between position of becoming Unitarian Christians or becoming no-hides, but not making the jump to Islam because of their Islamophobia. I mean, just let's admit it. That's what they can't bear. They would rather call themselves no-hides and be bossed around or mostly neglected by rabbis because rabbis would prefer to minister to their to other Jews and have to deal with ignorant Gentiles who don't get it. And that there's also the issue of not being perceived to be not quite such a high status rabbi if you minister to the needs of no-hides. And of course, as a no-hide, you would, if you're going to do the whole thing properly, you would have to have your own rabbi, and the rabbi would not really want to have, not really want to deal with you and not know whether to really lay it on the line for you about, idolatry or just self-soap you like Hezi does to everyone. All sorts of questions arise, if you want to become a no-hide. Usually they are men. Women are not interested in these things. They're just happy to, I guess, arrange the flowers in church and, do the status-seeking jobs and not be getting all hot round the collar about theology and beliefs and principles. So if you're a Gentile and you reject the Trinity, then you are faced with becoming a no-hide, a Unitarian Christian, or a Muslim. And since most Westerners, the overwhelming majority of Westerners, are Islamophobes, that is really going to be the last option for these men. So they might want to become no-hides, and with that comes a problem of not being, not being properly ministered to and being treated as second class, because the rabbi that you're supposed to be under. In fact, I think a lot of them don't even bother talking to rabbis. They just sort of call themselves no hides, and nobody really tells them what's going on, and that is their problem. They don't really know, and I could tell them, but they don't really trust me because they hate what I say. So they are bound to not let me make my point, or pretend not to understand what I've said, or if they have, immediately forget about it. So I'm saying to them, look, the only high status thing would be to become Muslim if you care for it. I mean, I'm not, I'm not saying I'm Muslim, but if you need a place of religious worship to go to, you would have to choose one. And then there's all the problems of the kids and the wife, and them not wanting to come with you, and it being something that might cause difficulties within your marriage, and may trigger a divorce under the rules of no fault divorce, which could be financially and emotionally and spiritually devastating. So they are in this terrible position. And Sam Titterman recently streamed a conversation he had with Sam Shamoon. And Sam Shamoon, as any of you who know who he is, was being very rude to Sam Titterman. And so I posted in the comments that, that he needn't have lowered himself. He could just talk to me. I would never be as rude to him as Sam Shamoon was. And of course, my comment was deleted. Is it a good sign or not? I think it is, because, obviously, Sam is he has allowed me to comment. He has reacted to my comments, and now he has blocked me. He has disabled me from commenting again. So I guess I have, struck a nerve in what I've been saying about, him painting himself into a corner. Now, if you just wanted a quiet life, you just go to church and you wouldn't, talk about Unitarianism. You just be a cultural Christian who takes your kids to church because your wife wants to go there, or it's her church, or it's the nearest church, and you can both agree to go to, that sort of thing. But what is the true afterlife position? That is a question, and I think Sam is a little conflicted about the whole thing. On the one hand, he doesn't want to upset his wife, and he doesn't want the children to be otherized by the Trinitarians. But it seems that they have been otherized by the Trinitarians by calling Sam a heretic, and this was something Sam himself said on one of his streams. And he's not the only one. There's somebody called, oh, I forget his name now, but he's blocked me as well. He was Catholic and then he became a Unitarian Christian. And people don't get how status affects them. And so it's not just a matter of, shooting your mouth off and saying you reject the Trinity or you accept it or whatever. There are consequences, obviously. If you're going to take your religion seriously, of course there are going to be consequences. I mean, on the other hand, I don't go to any place of religious worship because I am agnostic, but I have taken an interest in these things by going to different kinds of, services, religious services. So, I do have some idea of how these things are done and, and how these preferences are rooted in culture and identity. And this is why I promote secular Quranism, because it's this kind of um, neutral territory. So you can be a secular Quranist and go to any number of religious services without feeling you've compromised yourself. Because on the one hand, you will be doing, whatever your spouse wants you to do or whatever you think is appropriate for your children. And on the other hand, you don't feel so lowered in status that you, as a Unitarian Christian, find yourself going to a Trinitarian church and being told by the Trinitarians that you're a heretic and that, in the olden days you'd be burnt at the stake. So, I get it that you don't want to be put into that position. And I also get it, you don't want me reminding you of that, but I have to, because you have put yourself into a no man's land. By saying you're Unitarian, but you send your children to a Trinitarian church. You're not in control, are you? You're not in control of the religious education of your children because you are submitting to the religious preferences of your wife. And maybe she doesn't want to argue about it because she doesn't want to go to a Unitarian church service because they do things in a very odd way. I may have told you that some years ago I did go to one of these Unitarian church services, and so what do I call these people who preside over the service? A celebrant? You wouldn't call her a priestess. It was female, the person who did this pebble thing. So she made the congregation pick up a pebble and put it in a different place as a way of symbolizing the disposal of problems or something of that nature. And it was then that I saw how important it is to feel that you are part of an ancient ritual and not something that was made up maybe 200 years ago. It's not old enough. 200 years is not a religion old enough to be taken seriously. And this is fundamentally the problem of Christianity, that there are too many varieties of it. And this stems from the vagueness of its scripture, the disputes over its scripture, which books are to be included and which translation used. And when you examine the detail of these disputes and these divergent narratives, you come ineluctably to the conclusion that it was all made up, and all these sayings such as, "What a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive." And in America recently, there were these brown people in Austin, and they were um, wearing white and doing some kind of ceremony, and they were uh, and it was commented on, and they were assumed to be Muslim when in fact they were Christian from Ethiopia or somewhere like that. And then people go into a tailspin of race and religion and immigrants and politics. And I'm saying, look, Americans, you're not so special and superior that you don't need a functioning moral system because, well, we all do, don't we? We all need to do a minimum number of things to keep our group in existence and apart from others. We need to have laws that tell us not to kill each other and rob each other and rape each other. And we also need to be told what we should do if somebody were to be prepared to marry us. If we're marriageable and we get married, then we should become responsible married parents and bring up the next generation to be productive citizens of the future who will be a credit to their parents and not degenerates and criminals and people who will be a burden on society and a disgrace to their parents. So at the very least, we need to be mostly not gay and mostly not unmarried parents bringing up our illegitimate offspring in fatherless homes. At the very least, right? And this is what most religions, well, all the 5 world religions that we've heard of do. And for some reason, many Westerners find this very hard to understand. Or, I keep hoping they'll ask me the logical next question, and they never ask it because I think they already know what the answer is. They keep hoping against hope that what passes for Christianity, which is only cultural Christianity and a religion of social clubs, it's not going to be enough because it is ultimately the law that sets minimum moral standards. We may have some idea of what is ethical and what is moral, but what is legal is the lowest of all the standards of obedience. So if you become a criminal, well, that is pretty low. When you accuse people of being immoral or unethical, they can just still laugh and, well, at least I'm not a criminal. It's not against the law what I've just done. So obviously, it is the law that is the lowest acceptable standard of behavior. And if that legal standard is not even good enough, then of course your society will decline and your civilization degenerate and decline and fall and become extinct. Yes, Hezi does like to pontificate, and I did. I did use the transcript that is generated by YouTube to show that quite a lot of what he says, it doesn't really go anywhere. And in that stream, when I sort of implied that he was full of shit. He spoke for 5 minutes. He spoke for 5 minutes, and it didn't really get anywhere, and it barely made sense. And in the end, I guess, in the end, he's not senior enough. He's not a rabbi. He may think he's very religious, but yes, it is a question of hierarchy, really. In a properly ordered society, everybody knows that you listen to the elders, the ones with the experience and the education and the um, the seniority, and not the favorite of the YouTuber's friends. And I guess what infuriates me is the time wasted mouthing platitudes and feeling spiritual when there are so many things that do need to be discussed that are important and political, and of course nobody's interested because it's controversial. And I'm saying these things are important. These controversial things are important, so we need to at least inform ourselves about these things instead of just being cattle and going with the flow, or making a point of never discussing these things. Because, when World War III blows up, it will affect all of us, whether we did discuss it or not. And for Americans, it's kind of their fault that they have an out of control president, and they don't even know. It doesn't seem that they even know that they are the global hegemon. And, annoyingly, Jews do not seem to know that they're being set up. They're being set up to take the blame, while the neocons, plot their next neocon war, and pretend to do what Israel wants. When I think Benjamin Netanyahu is he's a fall guy. He might enjoy the his current position of being Prime Minister of Israel, but when things go wrong, he and Jews are going to take the blame. And the very cunning neocons who have made a mascot of Jews will know that when people get really, really angry, they're going to be attacking Jews rather than look amongst the mob. Will be attacking Jews and synagogues, and not quite know where to find their ruling classes who have been supporting all these neocon wars. And I don't think Jews know that Israel is a colony. Rabbi Mizrahi responded to Tucker Carlson's comments about Israel, and yes, Tucker is being very critical about Israel, and of course Jews will think he means them. He might do, he might not. Rabbi Mizrahi seems to think that Israel would be okay without American support, without American military support. I think that's a bit over optimistic. And there's Rabbi Tovia Singer, who also has accused Tucker of anti-Semitism. You would have thought people would know that, or Jews would know that accusing Gentiles of anti-Semitism um, is not working anymore. They're no longer ashamed, and I guess the voices voicing anti-Semitism is growing bigger and louder. But all these topics I've raised is all about understanding our place in the world. Who are we? What are we trying to do? And what are the consequences and all that sort of thing. So the Americans, they don't even know or would reject the idea that it is their government that is controlling the Jews and um, making Jews a mascot and making Israel their unsinkable aircraft carrier. And I guess Jews don't want to think that they're being, tricked and made into a fall guy so easily because of their pride. They don't want to think um, that they were so easily fooled by a bunch of Gentiles who only pretend to believe in Christianity. And there are so many layers of deception that nobody will actually uncover, leaving me to be the only one to do it, which doesn't give me a whole lot of authority because, if you're the only voice saying one particular thing, it's very easy for them to ignore you. Ultimately, it is a matter of repetition. So I think it helps to speak clearly and briefly, and even if the person tries to forget what you immediately forgets what you told them, and what you told them could be fitted into one sentence, well, at least they can remember what that sentence was and they can take it away, the takeaway point that I always go on about, and they can, keep it and maybe go over it and wonder what it means, and then eventually accept the truth of it, or pass it on to others. I think Americans are slowly beginning to realize that their ruling classes are truly corrupt and incompetent, or just plain mad, and that they're not moving on to the next step of, well, if it is true that our political system is utterly compromised and we don't even have a moral system that we can name whose principles have been codified, then what the hell are we doing and what are we to do? They won't even talk or think like that. And that is why I get so frustrated when they spend literally hours talking nonsense to each other. And it's only when you hear, the occasional word like Nick Fuentes and Christian nationalism that you realize, what it's all about. So they're still wondering if they can use Christian nationalism to restore their uh, their status in their own society. And I'm saying, no, you can't use Christian nationalism because it's already failed. It failed last century. And you can't jump out of a plane with a broken parachute unless you want to commit suicide. Well, I'm not really sure if they don't get it. I'm always wondering if they really get it but pretend not to in order to ignore their moral imperative. Or they really are so moronic that they just don't understand what I'm saying. I've been saying it for years and I've been using different ways of saying the same thing, and I just don't know. So Pick and Choose says he's fairly new to the TLC. Um, no, it's not a monolith. Some people get it. But you see, the thing is, because they can't make up their mind, so, one day they can make you think that they understand and agree, and the next time you speak to them, you are given the completely wrong, you know, you think, but I thought you said such and such, and I thought you understood, and they're just completely forgotten because they are actually double minded, and maybe they have short memories. And, they're not really looking for understanding, they're just looking to be part of a community. I don't know why you're calling me a crypto Jew. I'm not even proposing that people become Jews. I would actually say that if you want to get to heaven and you're a Jew, you would actually want Sharia, because living under Sharia would make you a better Jew than living under liberal democracy. And the interesting thing was that this was what Rabbi Mizrahi said about Iran. And now he really wants to nuke Iran. So it's very hard to know, even from rabbis, what they do think. So it's like a swing of the pendulum, I suppose. It won't settle, it won't stay in one place, and people want to have it both ways. Yes, I know the Jews will take the blame, and you have to wonder whether they deserve the blame. And I was thinking, what would I do if I were a Jew? I would. Well, it depends on whether I'm an atheist kind of Jew or a believing kind of Jew. But I just said that if I were a believing Jew, I would think that living under Sharia would make me a better Jew, because there would be fewer temptations, and it would also increase the likelihood of bringing up believing Jewish children and grandchildren and descendants. So I would choose Sharia, no problem. But then there is so much hatred for Muslims when really, if you just looked at the bare bones of the religions of Judaism and Islam, you would think, well, why don't they agree? They're really very similar, and also there is a prohibition against Jews entering churches which are places of abomination where idolatry is practiced, but Jews are allowed to pray in mosques with Muslims. I suppose the problem with Jews is that they do not have a leader and they do not seem to want one. It's rather like these white nationalists and anti-Semites who hate them. They don't want a leader either, because I guess they don't want to be put through the trouble of having to obey a leader only to be betrayed by that leader. And in that way, Jews and white nationalists suffer from the same problem of being leaderless. And not that Muslims are better off, really, because if you think of the Ummah, 20% of the Ummah are Shias. Shias are mostly in Iran. They do have a supreme leader, but Sunnis are really completely delegitimized because the Arab ones in the Gulf live under kingdoms, and I would say that that any Islamic scholar, any Sunni Islamic scholar would be compromised because they live in an absolute monarchy and they would be afraid of what their absolute monarch would do to them if they had the wrong interpretation of the Quran as far as as their absolute monarch is concerned. So you have the problem of all these important groups being in effect leaderless, and this allows them to take two opposite positions at the same time. So, in the case of Jews, you will have religious Jews and the secular Jews, and who is going to be the leader. Which group of Jews should the Gentile listen to? If the Gentile is only if the Gentile is atheist, then of course the atheist Gentile will prefer the atheist Jews. If the Gentile is religious, then they would be more likely to listen to the observant, religious, believing Jew. And since the Gentile has really not made up his mind on it and is utterly confused and doesn't even know what kind of Christian he is, he doesn't even know if he believes in the Trinity, and so as you can see, it's such a mess. I mean, the only way that we can understand what we're supposed to do is to know who we are and where we are relative to other people in our group, after deciding who our group is, and there doesn't seem to be any kind of rules for people to understand their place in the world. And sadly, it is America that is a problem, because America is infamous for not having a moral system, let alone a functioning moral system, which is why their leaders are so mad and evil, and why the ordinary American doesn't know whether he's coming or going. Do you think the Abrahamic Old Testament God originally was storm God? It's a new expression for me. I suppose if you want to go back, if you want to think of Zeus, who was known to throw thunderbolts, and then you think of Odin or Wotan, who you can sort of make the connection that if God exists, then he would be throwing thunderbolts, because I guess it's quite frightening, in a thunderstorm. And so you would think that it must be some kind of deity doing that sort of thing. But the whole idea, the Abrahamic God is the idea of, something even more powerful than a God that throws thunderbolts. It's a God that created the universe. And I suppose when you say that, a lot of people will just kind of, it will be too much for them to conceive of, and I guess they lose connection with the theory. So deja vu is an anti-Semite, and you can tell that somebody's an anti-Semite if they keep accusing you of being a Jew, and they think, it's a worse thing to be accused of. If you're an anti-Semite, the worst thing you can do is be accused of a Jew. And this is what anti-Semites do to each other. They accuse each other of being a Jew when they come into conflict with other anti-Semites, with conflicting anti-Semitic narratives. So that's how they roll, and they reveal themselves. So if you're an anti-Semite, you will reject the Noahide laws and say it's a Jewish conspiracy to execute Christians, which in a way is undeniable. Vincent Bruno, whom I used to stream very often with, would use the Noahide laws as an example of a Jewish threat. And it wouldn't matter how often I said, look, they're not really going to, take control in that way. And he said, oh, they don't need to take control in that way. They will just get the Gentiles to adopt the Noahide laws. And the issue, of course, is the first and second Noahide laws, which is a repetition of the first and second commandments, and it is a prohibition of idolatry and blasphemy, attracting the penalty of death for Jews, because that's what it says in the Torah. If you're a Jew and you're guilty of idolatry and blasphemy, you get it in the neck. And the logic of it would be that, if there were these laws and Jews were in charge, Gentiles convicted of idolatry and blasphemy would also be executed. And this is not what I'm proposing at all, as I keep explaining to people. All I want rabbis to do is to rank the 4 Gentile religions and rank Islam most and Christianity least Noahide. And because Jews have no central authority, you can't get them to do anything. And they don't want to do anything because they don't want to get into trouble with Gentiles. I mean, I know that Rabbi Mizrahi is a controversial figure amongst Jews who think he's too strict. And so, well, he has a very loyal following. Many assimilated Jews hate him. And I am Facebook friends with somebody who clearly wants to defame him and denounce him, and he's Jewish. But then he's a kind of hezzy sort of Jew. It's like everybody's fine, everything will be fine, we can all live together, let's all sing Kumbaya, that kind of Jew. And I'm thinking, well, what about your rules? Your rules are what make you. You're not just there to say that you're everybody's friend and you love everybody, when you know what your book says, and it's the opposite of loving everybody. Oh, thank you, Yoav, for coming. So Pig and Chew says, it can be healthy to have some space and time for people to discuss and explore the dynamics of communication. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. No, I think it's therapeutic too, and that's why I do it. And I've been doing it for so long, and people they still misunderstand me or pretend to misunderstand me, people like Jacob, and they can't even articulate what I've said. That's so stupid, but apparently I am. And I think they actually fear to discuss what it is I'm proposing. Because, obviously, if I'm hinging my entire theory on um, this book of rules from the Abrahamic God, which is the best available guide to humanity, because nobody can think of a better guide to humanity. So I think I'm, on very firm ground there. Vincent, the last few streams we had, I mean, I guess I got a bit tired of his, rotating around his trauma. I mean, I've known him for years, and he does kind of, go back on the same subject again, and he obviously won't he doesn't want to progress. You see, he's not really serious as a political activist. It's all about Jews, because he was traumatized by the religion of his mother, Jehovah's Witnesses. And I think that's why he has such a bad relationship with other religions. I think the last two streams, well, I guess I wasn't taking him seriously. I mean, I just didn't see. Well, I guess I could have been more sympathetic, but it doesn't matter. I mean, my time is given, well, nature abhors a vacuum, and we can, do more different things when certain people don't want to stream with you anymore because of their personal issues. So he wants to interpret eugenics in his own particular way, and I'm saying marriage is eugenic, and therefore to be eugenic is to increase the marriageability of your populace, and this cannot be encouraging people to be gay. And you would have to lower the status of unmarried parents by treating them as sex offenders. And if you're gay, I'm certainly not saying people, should be stoned to death or anything like that. But you will have to treat non-parents in a way that shows that that they are lower in status than married parents. And what's wrong with that? I mean, that's the only way to go forward, isn't it? If you want to address the shortfall in your birth rate. And Vincent is just not prepared to accept the logic of that. Why would Muslims or Christians care what rabbis say? Well, Christians and Muslims are always obsessed by Jews because it's another Abrahamic religion, and the Torah and the Quran are full of Jews, well, full of references to Jews. Christians worship a Jew, and inevitably the Quran has to mention them and explain why the Quran is better than the Torah. So That is why they should care. I mean, if they really, really cared about the truth. But most people just care about staying within the fold of, whatever religion they grew up in. No, I'm not taking to heart what Jacob says. I know, I know Jacob had to drop out of law school because he just couldn't be impartial, and he's been, in his own way, quite helpful. So I'm really not complaining, but I'm just saying there are people whom you would expect to take an interest in these things. I've been talking to lots of people over the years, and I would like to meet somebody who, cares about their afterlife. I mean, can it be that they are all just pretending to believe in God, who don't care about the afterlife as long as they can hang out with, their preferred gang? And this, I think, is crucial in revealing their lack of care or lack of thought of the afterlife. And this means that they're basically hypocrites, right? That they're just carrying on with the religion of mum and dad, and that's all they care about. So all these Christians, I mean, some of them seem quite, sincere, but they just take on this attitude of, oh, everybody's going to hell, and they have this peculiar view that justice and mercy are two separate things. And that's probably because they've been indoctrinated into thinking that that without the mercy of Jesus, they're all going to hell, and that's why they have to keep praying to Jesus. And this is what they're basically being told all their lives. When I have no trouble believing that justice is only what is fair enough. I see God's child is there. Now posting the link. Hello.
Hello, Claire. Is my audio better this time?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, I finally fixed my audio. I just want to say that I'm only available for like 20 minutes, but I just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
engage in the conversation. If you're live later, I could join, but probably tomorrow would be better. I'm just a bit busy tonight.
I'm sure 20 minutes should be enough for you to say what you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's just too much I can say, so I think maybe you should lead a discussion. Uh, but I did want to ask you, kind of talk about, because you offer the solution. That's what you market as, and I'd actually wanted to discuss a solution because I've not read your book. I'm not much of a reader, but I have listened to that white Muslim woman reading your book. So I have
Oh,
gone through it
good.
myself, actually read it because that's not my. I prefer to do it a different way, but
Hmm.
I think that'd be better with more time. So if you just wanna, I don't know, talk about whatever you fancy, and I could just chime in.
Well, I mean, if I would actually like a question, because one of the things that's sort of annoying me is that if you don't like my idea, I mean, well, try and undermine it and ask a few questions or something. Instead of just saying I don't like it, I'm not going to talk about it, and the end. And which I think is very unconstructive, because I think if somebody came to me and said, I have the solution for whatever, I would ask them questions to see if, they really have the answer, a decent theory anyway. So, um, and there's just so many basic misunderstandings. It's like, oh, they think I want everyone to convert to Islam. And it's like, no, but that's what they like to think. And they say that perhaps to you know keep up their levels of hatred and fear, and then they want to think, I want to make everybody dressed like an Arab or something. you know but I'm saying, you know you need a book of rules to ensure that people are following the rules. And I don't know how you're going to function um, if you don't have rules, and nobody seems to care about that, or they don't understand, or they you know
I do have a question for you. I've heard
Mhm.
you. I've heard you describe yourself as a cultural Christian. Uh, may you define what you mean by that? Because uh, I think to promote, because you do promote Islam to Christians. So
I'm
do you
not
not
promoting
enjoy the fact?
Islam, but I'm happy to admit that I am promoting Sharia, or the Sharia light of secular Quranism, which doesn't require anyone to change their religion, just obey the rules. And the rules they will probably hate is my proposal to treat unmarried parents as sex offenders, abolish gay marriage, and privilege married parents over non parents. That is probably what they're going to really, 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 really hate.
I think most people wouldn't have an issue with that. Um, I mean, treating the unmarried parents as sex offenders, I disagree with that just because, there've been some great people that were the birth of an illegitimate, uh, you know,
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not
um,
saying we're going to treat illegitimate people, you know, the illegitimate offspring of
no, no, no,
unmarried
no, no,
parents
no, no,
badly.
I understand, but the women, like, the men will manipulate the women more often than the woman will manipulate the man. So I feel like to punish the woman is, it's not righteous. So I think promoting marriage is better than just punishing unmarried parents.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. What you saying? Can you just say it again?
So punishing unmarried parents as sex
Mm-hmm.
offenders, that's one of your goals, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Um, may you just outline what you mean by that? Because for me, I can't agree with that because I think it's flawed principle. It's a flawed principle. But if you could just define it better, maybe I could kind of understand what you mean by that,
Well, it's
or
basically
or
chapter
or
20.
how you would enforce it.
Okay, so chapter 24, verse 2 says 100 lashes if you're convicted of fornication, which is having sex with somebody you're not married to. Well, you're not married yourself. That's basically fornication. And I'm saying, well, obviously in practice, not everybody is going to get caught. You're only going to get caught if you have a bastard, right? And you're only going to have a bastard if you're too stupid to even take precautions, or you haven't heard of the abortion pill or the morning after pill. You haven't heard of the pill. You don't know about condoms. You're so stupid and careless. You just randomly have sex with any Tom, Dick, and Harry. And then when you get knocked up, you don't know to get an abortion when you can get it on the NHS. How stupid can you be?
So, are you saying it's better to abort the bastard than to conceive it?
I'm sorry?
Are you saying that it's better to abort?
Well, I think a lot of men would probably want abortion if they were the ones who got pregnant. So I think a lot of people are conflicted about it because, on the one hand, they think it's a bad thing to be, but they can see how easily it could happen to them if they were female, which is why it's such a feminist, thing. Um, and I suppose in practice, you can imagine a very stern, puritanical father, wanting to ban abortion, but if his own daughter were knocked up, he'd probably want her to get an abortion, right? So I'm not banning abortion, but I'm saying you have to be so careless that to end up being an unmarried mother in the 21st century with so many with modern contraception and abortion on the NHS, and you still become an unmarried mother, you know. And this must mean that, there is no stigma to being an unmarried mother. It's so normal because everybody has sex outside marriage, or sex before marriage. So if you normalize
Um,
fornication, or premarital sex, if you prefer, then everybody will think, oh yeah, there but for the grace of God go I. I just happen, to be lucky, but I could easily have got myself knocked up. That's how people think, and that's why that they're so tolerant towards it. But obviously,
that's
if you
quite.
want to take marriage seriously again, you can't be like that.
I'm very shocked to learn now that you'd actually support abortion, and that is shocking for me to hear because abortion is like the get out of jail free card for fornication. So if the consequences of fornication were more real, instead of having just a get out of jail card like the pill or abortion, I think that would make people fornicate less. But abortion is a sin in the church. Um, do you know what the didache is? Have you heard of it
A
before?
what? Sorry, I didn't hear. A what? Do I know what a what is?
The didache, Didache.
Never heard of it.
So the didache is a first century, dated around 45 AD to like 60 AD, first century document that was rediscovered in, I think, the 18th century in uh, uh, some monastery in Europe. And basically, what the Didache is, it's a first century document, not on theology, like belief, but it's on Christian um, practices, behavior. So when you see the church doing stuff like infant baptism, for example, you know, a lot of Protestants don't like that, and they say they can't find it in scripture. Well, it's in the Didache, because this was the teachings of the apostles in the first century. So every single apostolic church, everything in the Didache, they apply. And in the Didache, abortion, you can look at you can look it up. Abortion is explicitly banned and prohibited. Pedophilia is prohibited. So these things, the early church from the beginning completely banned it. It's not allowed. So for you to promote abortion when you're trying to also promote righteousness or a more righteous
I'm not
lifestyle,
promoting abortion.
well, you are,
I'm
because
not going to ban
if
it though.
if no, I wouldn't ban it, because in extreme circumstances, it should be permissible. But when you're just, again, it's the get out of jail free card for the fornicator. So this makes fornicating more plausible than if there was no get out of jail free card and the consequences were real. People would actually think before they do it. But when you have
Yeah, but
these get out of jail
if
free
you
cards,
say,
you're more likely to
it,
fornicate.
yeah, but I'm saying if you're caught having bastard offspring and you're going to suffer corporal punishment of 100 lashes, then, people get it. People get it that it's a sexual offense. But you have to say it, right? You have to say it first. Because if you don't say it,
Um,
people won't get it.
okay, so as a woman, how would you go about promoting purity and fleeing from lust and sexual immorality to these women? Because the female voter base is the primary driver for the leftist ideology we have at the moment, and obviously sexual liberation. So, how would you go about trying to implement this change in behavior to these women who do not want that? And you know how the younger generation is, my generation, you know, it's going to be harder to reach them than an older generation. So, how would you actually go about doing that to persuade them to change their behavior and ideas?
Well, I mean, just by promoting, secular Quranism and saying this is going to be the consequence if you have bastard offspring, and then they go, oh, do you know how, and I'll say, well, if you kept your legs crossed, men would up their game. So that's what you have to do, because if you keep putting out to men who have no intention of marrying you, then of course they're going to pump and dump you.
But you know, in this day and age, like just saying a statement like that isn't enough. Like, how would you actually convince these women as a woman yourself?
Just by stating that this is the only way to make men and women take marriage seriously again, by stating the consequences of having unlicensed children. So in America, the marriage certificate is called a marriage license. So at least the Americans are more in touch with the idea that a marriage license licenses you or the parties to the marriage to have sex and children with each other. And otherwise, it's unlicensed sex and unlicensed children or illegitimate offspring. So that's how we're supposed to think about it. And that, some people may say, oh, we don't care. But then I would say, well, you would care if the penalty were public corporal punishment. And then they say, well, you and whose army are going to do that? And I'm going to say, well, I'm just going to put it to people who care about the continuation of Western civilization. And if most people don't care, I guess it's over and out for Western civilization. If they're not even going to say what is necessary to correct its direction. If they can't even say that, well, I guess it's over and out. But at least I raise the issue. But you would have thought that, all these white nationalists and these people who say they care so much about their race, they can't even support marriage. Well, I guess they don't really care that much, so everybody's a hypocrite. Oh, he's gone. Okay, I will deal with Pick and Choose saying, I care about the afterlife and I sincerely hope for a loving creator, but the reason I'm a Catholic is indeed largely mum and dad, family, etc. Yeah, but I'm also saying there's only one Abrahamic God, right? So it's the same God that Jews and Muslims worship. And if what you attach to is culture and tradition, but not the afterlife about pleasing the Abrahamic God, of whom there is only one, then maybe you haven't got to the bottom of this moral and religious problem, which is about sanctifying marriage and supporting the institution of marriage. And if you're not even prepared to say what in theory is necessary to make people take marriage seriously again, then I guess you don't really care that much about your civilization or your nation. Skyworks says, there's no afterlife. You as an individual will be unaware of anything when you die, and what was once you will be recycled so that new life may arise. Well, there are these religious groups, and I don't think you can deny that the Abrahamic religions are more successful than the Eastern religions. So, in status terms, ensuring that you worship the Abrahamic God, or even pretend to, or try to obey his laws is better than being a Buddhist or a Hindu, particularly if you're the beneficiary of imperialism, which Westerners are. Skywork says, I want everyone to be subject to. Well, I'm saying that my interpretation of Quranic principles is more liberal than what you get from the normative Muslim. I don't know why you think Sharia is so insane. I think it makes sense. What is the punishment for adultery? It would come under chapter 24, verse 2, which is 100 lashes, okay? If discovered. It's the same. It's 100 lashes if you are convicted of adultery. Well, I'm saying practically everyone in the West has had premarital sex. I'm certainly not going to pretend that I was any kind of a virgin bride, but I can tell you that I do not have illegitimate offspring. Which is probably more than you can say, Skyworks, since you are male, and men can have any number of illegitimate offspring without realizing it. No, I'm saying that I do not have illegitimate offspring, right? So that is the that would be the element. Okay, you can fornicate, but if you don't get knocked up, nobody's going to prosecute you unless you are a porn actor or actress. So you will be, on record for having sex with, somebody not your husband or your wife, and then you would get done for that. So I know Skyworks is saying, because I'm not a virgin bride, I'm in no position to punish anyone. But I'm actually proposing quite a low standard. Most people in the West will already have had a premarital sex, and but as long as you're not an unmarried parent, you're okay. Nobody's going to pry into your bedroom activities if you don't have illegitimate offspring, which is, it's quite a low bar. So there's no point. It's not very convincing when you pretend to be so shocked. As I was saying earlier to God's child, I was saying that in the 21st century, to get yourself knocked up with the existence of abortion and that morning after pill and the abortion pill and, all kinds of modern contraception, I mean, and you still can't get it together to not get knocked up, well, there must be something wrong with you and you should be made an example of. Pick and Choose says a lot of secular modern people take marriage seriously. I mean, how do you know when so many marriages end in divorce? All right, I'm nearly at the 90-minute mark. I got this weird question asking me who I am. I think you know who I am. I don't know why you're pretending to be surprised at what I'm saying now, since I've been saying this for quite a while. So thank you all for coming. I hope I've managed to clarify a few things. I don't think I've even said anything new, but I guess I do need to keep repeating myself.